Hello, and welcome to Voices of Women, sponsored by the Bristol County Commission on the Status of Women. I'm your host, Gail Forts, Executive Director of the YWCA Southeastern Massachusetts, and welcome to our 4th annual Oscars show. Yay! So we have a fabulous panel back again. We have 2 returnees and 2 new representatives on our team to discuss the movies nominated for Oscars that's coming up in a few weeks. So we'll start off with introducing our panel, and we'll start with you, Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Parker. I'm the director of the Center for Women, Gender, and Sexuality at UMass Dartmouth, and I'm also the chair of the board of the YWCA of Southeastern Mass, and I'm someone very much interested in the ways in which women are represented and people of color are represented in theater and the arts and movies.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I'm one of the members of the YWCA Girls Exclusive Group.
And you're in 8th grade.
Oh, and I'm in 8th grade at Keith Middle School.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Latham, and I am the Girls Exclusive Coordinator, where I work after school with Victoria. And I'm also the Development Associate and do a number of advocacy projects at the YW.
And I am Ashley Bendixson, former YW board member, and I am now a national speaker and prevention educator in the areas of domestic violence and sexual assault, primarily traveling to middle schools, high schools, and colleges to educate youth about healthy relationships.
All right, so again, thank you all for being here. This is one of the favorite shows that we do every year. I think this is usually our highest rated show, so I'm really excited to talk about the movies this year. So why don't we remind our audience, Julie, about what the Bechdel test is?
Certainly. So as we know, the Bechdel test was developed by Alison Bechdel, who's a comic strip writer who wrote a comic strip called Dykes to Watch Out For. And in 1985, she credits one of her friends for coming up with the idea of the Bechdel test, where you would judge a movie based on 3 factors. 1, are there 2 women in the movie? 2, who have names? 2, do they talk to each other? 3, not about a man. And some of you will find it shocking that a number of movies do not actually even come close to passing this test. So we use this as our baseline to judge the movies nominated for this year's Academy Awards.
Okay. Well, it's really interesting to see what has passed and what hasn't, because in the prior years, the majority have not passed. So let's see if anything's improved over time. So we have some exciting movies that I think everyone has seen, or a few of you have seen. So let's start off with the first one, which is BlacKkKlansman.
Sure, so Ashley and I both were able to watch this. Do you
Okay.
want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
So for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's based on a true story about Ron Stallworth, who was the first African-American detective on the Colorado Springs Police Department. And he basically takes on a task to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan, and he has someone go undercover. And it's a pretty interesting story, and it does pass the Bechdel test, although it was pretty hard, I think, for us to figure out how it passed. And you have a better recollection of how that might have worked.
Right, well, I just saw it just a few days ago. So yes, with the Ron Stallworth is part of his job to go undercover. He goes to a talk at Colorado College, and there is the students have the Black Student Union has invited Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, and there is where he meets Patrice, his soon-to-be girlfriend. And so there are only 2 female characters. Well, actually, there are 3 female characters in the movie. Patrice as his girlfriend, then there's the wife of one of the Klan members. But Patrice has a girlfriend, and the 2 of them, yes, they do talk, but it's always kind of in relation to Stokely Carmichael and pushing back against Ron Stallworth, who is there to talk about, like, yes, they're talking about the liberation of Black people, but in relation to Stokely Carmichael. So yes, it passes, but it does always seem that they're not necessarily having like a fully realized self.
But, you know, I guess to its credit, they're not really talking about a man in the sense of a relationship or love,
totally.
which is really nice to see them talking
Right.
about human rights and social justice.
Right, and I think too, even to challenge the Bechdel test as a standard, Patrice is a fully realized person with opinions of her own. So when she pushes back against Ron Stallworth about police brutality, about the liberation of Black people, she's the president of the Black Student Union. Like, she's a fully accomplished, independent woman. But her role in the film, I think, is for Ron Stallworth to grapple with her challenging him, and he's developing his own sense of self. So she's still a ancillary character. You know, she's not the protagonist of this. It's about Ron Stallworth.
I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely entertaining. If anything, the ending jumped from the 1970s to what happened in Charlottesville. So I think that's I'm
Brought me
excited.
to tears watching the footage.
Yeah, that was tough to watch, but I almost would have liked to see what happened to the characters in the 1970s. What happened to the real Ron Stallworth after that? Did he continue to look at these, infiltrate these types of, racial politics in Colorado and everything? But it's just a big jump. So,
Great. Well, thank you.
yeah, sorry, kind of a little longer
No, it's
than
great.
we thought.
It's great that you're so excited about the movies. So
Yeah, definitely see it. It's
next,
very good.
one that I think many people heard a lot about. I know one that I think one of the only ones I saw on the list, Black Panther. So Victoria, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Black Panther does pass the Bechdel test because many of the females in it, their main goal is to save their country, and they have many conversations that do not have to do with men. And like every female in the movie has like their own path that is not like defined by men. And like the women in the movie are like portrayed as like a positive, and they're leaders in their country.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what the plot of the movie is?
So the movie's about after his father's death, T'Challa comes back to his country to like take the throne from his father, and one of like
I think it was his cousin that was
his
came from
cousin
America and was challenging.
his cousin wanted the throne for himself, so he begins to like cause conflict between the two, and they end up like battling.
Yeah.
Now, it was a really interesting, movie. I don't really watch Marvel
Yeah.
movies, but because I heard so much about it, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm actually going to watch this, and it was kind of exciting. I think it was the first time a Marvel movie's been nominated.
Yes.
I mean, all black cast, all black
Yeah.
director, a fairly young director. So it was just really exciting to see powerful, characters in the movie. So we'll see what happens. That'll be exciting to see.
Yeah.
Okay, next is Can You Forgive Me? Ashley, can you talk about that?
Sure. So this is also based on a true story about Lee Israel, who was a celebrity writer. She would profile and write books on different celebrities. But at a certain point in her career, her boss or her publisher or whoever it was basically said, like, your work is garbage, like, I'm not accepting this. So in order to pay her bills, she ends up forging a letter by a deceased writer and selling it for a ton of money to some local bookstore. And she just gets hooked on how easy this seems to be to forge all of these letters and documents by deceased writers and deceased celebrities and actors. And it's kind of just the true story of this whole process. In the end, she was estimated to have forged over 400 documents, and she was charged with it. So it was interesting. Melissa McCarthy plays Lee Israel. She did a great job. And there's not too many characters in the movie. She kind of has a very close male friend that she is always talking about her scam with. But it does pass the Bechdel test, and to my memory of the movie, I don't really know who the other female character is, but just from going back and doing some research, apparently she did have a conversation with someone else. But she, her love life or intimacy or like that's not part of the story at all. It's really just a memoir about, her being charged with these crimes. So it was interesting. Yeah, it's worth seeing. It was funny because I actually chose to go see it because I thought for some reason that it was about a female ghostwriter for like a popular male writer. And I was like, cool, yeah, like, a woman that was behind the scenes. And then I was like, this isn't what I thought it was at all. She was a criminal. But so anyway, but it was a good movie and it did pass slightly.
Okay, great, thank you. Another movie we've heard a lot about, A Star is Born. Julie, tell us
Star is
about
Born.
that.
A lot of us have seen it, I think. So the basic premise, of course, is this is Bradley Cooper's attempt to kind of reinvigorate the tradition of A Star is Born that goes back four different variations of A Star is Born. Many people say the original is the best, and there was one I believe with Judy Garland. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Wow.
And Barbra Streisand,
Streisand.
yeah. So, I think all of the Star is Borns have had kind of a different riff on the situation of the man in terms of him helping this young woman rise to stardom, either in music, in theater, movies. This one, of course, is music, as we know. Lady Gaga plays the lead. And then his own battle with addiction. As you've seen in all of them, actually, the man is dealing with some kind of addiction. It's a great movie. It got rave reviews. It barely passes the Bechdel test. I think that there's this brief kind of encounter between Lady Gaga's character and this woman backstage who does have a name. So people who are, pro the Bechdel test will say, well, she had a name and they had a conversation. But I think it's interesting as well. We'll talk a little bit more about the director nominations, but Bradley Cooper did get snubbed for Best Director. Lady Gaga was nominated for Best Actor, Best Actress, and he's also nominated for Best. So maybe they felt like we can sub it for director because they're going to give him the actor nomination. So that's A Star Is Born. It's a tearjerker, I'll say that. Bring your tissues.
Right. Anybody else see that wants to add anything to it?
I thought it was great. Like, it wasn't anything what I expected it was going to be. It was definitely a heavy movie, but I thought it did a great job of really showcasing like real personal life issues that somebody's going through. And I thought they both did an awesome job acting. I didn't know Bradley Cooper could sing. Yeah, it was cool.
He's pretty
I think everybody
all-around
did.
talent. He's got like multiple talents.
And when she sang La Vie en Rose, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The drag scene, I'm like, I
Yeah.
love this movie. This
Yeah.
is yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great. That's great. Vice, Jordan.
Yeah, I did see Vice. That's you finish it being like, whew, that's kind of it hits you right in the gut. It's hard to watch because I grew up knowing only later kind of who Dick Cheney was. I didn't grow up experiencing, and even then you learn at the beginning of the movie, this is Adam McKay doing the best he can to put this story together on one of the most private people in our history. So Dick Cheney has made this career of keeping all of this secret. And so this film tracks Dick Cheney's rise from being in Wyoming, coming up to becoming the vice president, and how we today are still dealing with the ramifications of what he orchestrated from the 1970s on. It connects very clearly to where we are politically today. I'd say yes, it does pass the Bechdel test because this movie looks at Dick Cheney's family life. And so, right, he's married to Lynn Cheney and he has two daughters, Liz and Mary. And so I think that when you see their family dynamic, that's where this passes the test, especially in the scene where Mary comes out and she's talking about how her girlfriend broke up with her to her mother. And also when his daughter Liz is running for his congressional seat in Wyoming, and she's debating about whether or not to come out as against same-sex marriage and what that would do to her sister. So there is these communications there amongst these women in their family, where he's Christian Bale playing Dick Cheney is silent in most of them, and he just gives the nod to tell his daughter go forward. And that's, spoiler alert, that happens at the end of the movie. It's a huge scene as a betrayal.
Because it actually happened.
Right. Spoiler if you don't know this. And it's the biggest betrayal to his daughter Mary, because he had spent so much of the film saying, we're not going to talk about Mary. I'm not going to talk about my daughter being a lesbian. And then when his daughter Liz comes out against same-sex marriage, you just see Mary's heartbreak. It's hard to watch, but yes, it does pass.
Great. All right, great. How was Christian Bale in that role?
It's amazing.
It's amazing to see him like that. I'm
It's
just thinking of
absolutely
him in
amazing to watch.
different roles.
He's so gross, but it is so good. So I definitely recommend it. I mean, it's hard to say that that's nominated for Best Picture, but I feel like it's required viewing for anyone in terms of civic engagement to watch about how, kind of how The Big Short, I'd say that's a movie that we all should watch about the housing crisis. This is something we all should watch about how we got to where we are, especially with what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff like that. But Best Picture, I don't know. Let's talk about Roma. That is, that's
Great
definitely
Great transition. That's a good segue. That's the next one on the list.
that is, poised to win Best Picture, and we should all see it, right? It's absolutely excellent. It's a semi-autobiographical film about Alfonso Cuarón, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, about his upbringing in Mexico, and what he wanted to do was, he had these memories of growing up in a middle-class family in Mexico and his father abandoning the family in the early 1970s. And instead of him wanting to follow the movie based on his memories, he went at this from the perspective of his their domestic worker. And she's actually still a part of his life. She has been interviewed in this process, and he interviewed her really closely in writing the screenplay. She's on the Oscar trail with him talking about this film. And in the movie, so the movie follows Cleo, and she's a young Oaxacan woman who's brought to Mexico City and serves as the domestic worker for this family with her friend Adela, and the wife, like the matriarch of this family, her name is Sophia. And you do see, this definitely passes the Bechdel test. Yeah, 100%. Especially in the way that this family negotiates having two domestic workers in the house who care for those children like they're their own, and it follows Cleo having an unexpected pregnancy and being abandoned by the father of that child, and kind of it tracks that throughout the film. And the film, though, very much contextualizes what is going on in Mexico in the early 1970s, with like the paramilitary police force, what's going on with, I don't know, kind of in the more rural areas, and labor and class strife there. So it's very good. It's all in Spanish. So yeah, I definitely recommend it.
Is that the first time something all in Spanish has been nominated for Best Picture?
I think so, because
think so,
it's
too.
meant to, it would fall more in line with a
International.
foreign,
International.
best foreign film. But it's been winning Best Picture in most of the, I think, actually Bohemian Rhapsody won, didn't it, at the Globes? But I
Yes.
think Roma won at the BAFTAs, which primes it to win at the Oscars. But yeah, it's very good.
All right, great. Okay. And I know there was a few that we didn't have a chance to see. Bohemian Rhapsody
Yeah,
was
so
one
we
of
didn't
them.
see Bohemian Rhapsody. The Favorite, which we believe passes. We think Bohemian Rhapsody doesn't, based on our research and folks we've talked to, and Green Book as well, which is really the story of two men. Very much so we don't think. And so part of what we wanted to do this year to switch it up was we wanted to show you this picture, right, which is, of course, all of the people nominated for Best Director, and they have certainly something in common. Best Male Director. So we thought, just to kind of give the Academy a nudge about how women weren't considered for Best Director, we would talk about a couple of movies that we wanted to recommend that were directed by women. So Ashley, you saw Mary Queen of Scots?
I did. Mary Queen of Scots was great. It's stunning, like visually stunning, just the costumes and the scenery. It's a gorgeous movie. But it's essentially the story about Mary Stuart, who became Queen of France, was widowed at 18, and then moved back to Scotland to reclaim the throne. But at the time, Queen Elizabeth I had rulership over Scotland. So the whole movie is really them kind of going back and forth through letters and messengers, speaking to each other, and it definitely passes Bechdel. They are strong, independent women that are about rulership and leadership in their kingdoms versus anything else, and they really admire each other's strengths, and they communicate about how they want to meet, and like Queen Mary is trying to say we should work together as sisters in this, and it's just a really powerful movie. I thought it was great. The only downside to the movie is that it tells this beautiful story of how that all rolled out, but then all of a sudden they summarize like 15 years into like 10 seconds at the end of the movie. It's almost like you needed another hour to learn the full story, but I was really fascinated by it, and I was really inspired by who they were as women at that time in such leadership roles. So very cool movie, definitely passed Bechdel, and could have had a nomination easily.
Right, directed by Josie Rourke.
So female directors.
Female directors, yep. The next one that we watched that we want to recommend is A Wrinkle in Time. Victoria, talk a little bit about that movie.
So A Wrinkle in Time is a really great movie. It's about this teenage girl and her little brother who lost their father, who's a scientist, because of him doing his research. So he went to a different planet, and they encounter these three women who are travelers from that planet, and they come to help them find their father because their father's in like a different planet. So yeah, and it does pass the Bechdel test because the women, they talk about like her finding a way to like accept herself and like bringing her up. So yeah.
Yeah, I did see that movie too with my daughter, and it was really interesting that the female characters, Oprah was in it, so that was one of the, you know, the main ones. So there's really empowering her.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of the kids, like, she's bullied at school, you know, they think, you know, they make fun of her because her father left, and her little brother's really, really smart, so he kind of gets teased too for being, you know, probably, you know, a 12-year-old in a 5-year-old body type thing, but she's really determined to, you know, find her father, even though, I think her mother kind of thought that the father just kind of walked out on them, but it's really the story about her and her strength, and she has a friend, a male friend, that kind of just helps her throughout her journey, and the three women are really, really great. So it's a great story.
Well, and I think that anybody who knows anything about Ava DuVernay, I mean, one of her kind of missions as a female director in Hollywood is to hire women, you know, so like her TV show, that as soon as I said it, I'm going to forget the name of it.
Brown Sugar?
No. It's something sugar.
I don't know what
Oh, it's so good, actually. Sugar, that's going to drive me nuts. She actually only hires women directors to direct those episodes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so she's been really, I think, great about promoting about women in Hollywood. Just a couple others that we can mention real quick that some of us haven't seen, but On the Basis of Sex, which is about the actual fictional story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is directed by Mimi Leder. Leave No Trace, which is directed by Deborah Granick. You Were Never Really Here by Lynn Ramsey. Blockers by Kay Cannon. Madeline's Madeline, which is by Josephine Decker, and then a movie called Werewolf by Ashley McKenzie. So all of these women produced movies and directed these movies, and none of them, you know, made it at all up the list.
So what can we do to help, you know, change that? I mean, I know we talk about this every year. Is it just by having more people see the movies? Is it writing to the Academy? You know, what is it that still keeps women not being nominated?
I guess I'd be curious as to know, like, how do some of these movies get all the exposure that they do when they're coming out? Because a lot of those I've never even heard of. So is it like a funding issue, or we're only putting the money behind this movie because we know this will be a blockbuster, and I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely part of
think
it,
it's part of
especially
it.
being in LA. The campaigns that these studios do is pretty massive. Right, the billboards that you've seen for Lady Gaga for A Star Is Born are just, they're huge.
Right.
But maybe we should stop prioritizing the Oscars. Like, if we can boycott the NFL, should we boycott the Oscars? I mean, if this is an academy that's mostly of white men, is this now just an antiquated organization that doesn't seem to be adapting?
Right, like an
Right.
antiquated recognition system. Right. That's pointless in so many ways.
Right.
Right. Actually, this morning I always have Good Morning America on, and they were talking about how they're cutting like certain things, so they're going to be giving awards, you know, behind the scenes or offline or during commercials, and one of them was cinematography, and they were complaining that you need cinematography, you know, for a movie, and why is that?
Why is that the one that gets cut?
Why is that the one that gets cut
Right.
versus? I mean, it's really hard to cut anything, you know, because I think you'd probably be there for 12 hours, but. You know, they were like already complaining and talking about, you know, that's important, you know, to them because, you know, you need that too. So it was just interesting to see, you know, what's going to happen. You know, they don't have a host. They're going to do something different with several co-hosts.
It's
This
so
year
funny,
there's a little
right?
drama going on there
It's
too.
like the NFL can't get anyone to perform at halftime, and the Oscars
Right.
can't get anyone to perform to host. Is that symptomatic that these institutions are just not adapting? What do you think?
Put you on the spot.
Are you gonna watch
She's
it?
like,
Do you watch it?
The Oscars?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah.
it's fun to watch.
It
It
is.
is fun to watch.
The red
I think the
carpet.
other thing we can do too is like certainly they say if you go to opening nights of women-directed shows or women-written shows, is that they judge the money on that too.
Right.
So a lot of times it's a Friday night. it's not always convenient for us to be like, oh, I have to go out and see these women-directed shows like on this day,
Right.
so that the box office numbers are shown for that opening night.
Right.
So that's always a challenge.
Is there some type of website that like announces release dates for films? Because I feel like by the time I see a movie, it's already gotten like enough viewership to make it to my local theater. So where do you find out like when opening nights are, where movies are playing?
Not really sure. I'm
I
sure
don't know
there's some
either.
type of
Yeah, that's a
website
great
there, but
question.
movies don't stay
I would
around a long
travel.
time either anymore too.
Right, 'cause
they're
there's so many of
there's
them,
so
I
many.
think.
And I think a lot of people just wait,
Yeah.
because it's expensive, and you just you watch it on Netflix or
Right.
Right,
And
like
stuff
Fire
The
Stick or whatever you have
Yeah,
at
yeah.
home.
Stuff like The Favorite has been in small independent theaters for a while, and now maybe it's hitting the larger screens, So again, it goes back to like, look where some of these movies are playing versus the rest of them.
But like Black Panther, they brought it back, and it was going to be for free for X amount of days because of that. But again, that was a Marvel, so it gets a lot of push. It got
Right.
a lot of
Right.
money behind it. So I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Yeah,
Me
I think
too.
it's exciting to see that nominated for Best Picture. I think that's like an exciting move that the Oscars have gone in, especially because of its wide appeal. It just seems like it's a more democratic film. It's going to have more viewers, more people excited to cheer for it. And I don't know.
I think that was kind of the way it was last year with the movie about the scary movie that was nominated.
Get
for-
Out.
Get Out.
Yeah.
That was like the first time that we'd seen, a black director and
Yeah.
this movie about this story. Speaking of people of color, I think there's like another drill down to the Bechdel test, right? Which
Right.
is the racial Bechdel test. Does anybody want to talk about that?
Sure. So, well, Victoria and I were talking about it on the drive over. Very similar to the Bechdel test in that, is there more than one person of color? Unsurprisingly, a lot of films fail this, like Star is Born, right off the bat. But so, if there are, is there more than one person of color in the film, and do those people have a conversation about something other than the white star or other than the white protagonist, right? So you look at a movie, we're talking about Black Panther, 100% passes this, but A Star is Born very obviously fails. Yeah.
And then we
That's
can apply
interesting.
that, I think, to LGBT folks as well, right? Are
Right.
there two people who identify as queer, who talk to each other, have names, not about heterosexual people?
Right.
Right. That's true. So that's all good points. So I mean, all things. I think once you know about these things, I think you watch movies with a different lens. I know when I had never heard of this before until 4 or 5 years ago when we started doing this. So then you start looking at it that way. Films, TV shows. I mean, you can do a lot of things.
You can do it
with anything.
You
can
can
do
apply
with
this to
anything.
anything that you're watching.
Exactly.
I know. I mean, there's this this ongoing joke that the zombie genre has to kill off a person of color in the first opening scene, and they'll laugh like, "Oh, that's a staple of the genre." Like that's a problem, right? If this is just accepted, or as right, what's the LGBTQ character? Are they always a certain stereotype or something like that,
Trope.
right?
Right,
A trope. Same with the Smurfette, which I thought Black Klansman got a little bit close to, where she's the lone woman and she has an exciting character, but it's just that one woman surrounded by men, and that's a really common trope as well. So, right, things that we're being more aware of.
And I think the bottom line is that those pieces about the Smurfette, that's not real life, right? All of us work in co-ed worlds, where we're often with men and women and, sometimes people who identify as non-binary in the course of our regular day-to-day lives, Rarely are we ever segregated out, when there's only one man or there's only one woman and you're with a bunch of men. And I think that's interesting too, that never does it actually reflect how the world actually operates.
Right. No, that's really, really true. So this is great. Thank you again for doing this. We really appreciate you taking the time. Any final words, final thoughts?
Ooh, should we
Yeah, we
pick
wanna-
our picks for
Yeah,
best
go ahead.
picture?
Sure.
All right. What do you think, Ashley?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I like so many of them, and they're all so different. So I don't know. I haven't
Okay.
put much thought into that.
Jordan?
I expect Roma to win, but I want Black Panther to win.
Yeah, me too.
All right. 2 for Black Panther. Julie?
So I would also love Black Panther to win. And I think it is telling, although we know we only have male directors, we still pass the Bechdel test more than we have in years, right? We've got 1,
Right.
2, 3,
Yes.
4, 5, 6, out of 9 that passed. So that's a win for us.
Absolutely.
Even though some of them were like by the tiniest little bit,
Right,
you know?
right.
No, when we started, we had none. So I
Right.
think every year
Right.
there's a slight improvement.
And you can go to BechdelTest.com and look at any movie that you've seen. They try to keep that updated on a regular, you know, and see people's comments and maybe why they're disputing whether that little conversation that the two women had actually counts or not.
Right, right. Because sometimes you think it doesn't.
What were the Best Picture nominees?
Black Klansman, Black Panther, Can You Ever Forgive Me, The Favorite, A Star Is Born, Vice, Roma, Bohemian Rhapsody,
All the
and
movies.
Green Book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like A Star Is Born is just going to get award after award?
Maybe not that one. They might
Interesting.
get something else.
I'll be
I don't
curious.
know. It'll be interesting. But I think there's more nominees than there has been in previous years. I think when we first started doing this,
Yeah.
there
It was
wasn't
like 5
9.
or 6.
It was
it's hard
like
to get
5 or
all of
6.
us to
I
watch
was
9
surprised.
movies. Yeah.
It seems like there's more.
9 is
Every
a
year
lot.
there's a few more for, I don't know, I'm not sure really what the reason is.
No,
but,
I don't either.
And when do they air?
February
February.
24th, I want to say.
That sounds like the right date.
Maybe we'll tune in.
Sunday night
Maybe we
for
won't.
3 hours. 3 hours plus.
Maybe I'll read about it the next
Watch
day.
the beginning, you watch
Maybe
the
we'll
end,
be busy.
Yeah.
and then watch in between, you know, too. So that's
Tune in
great.
for the musical performances.
Musical performances.
Change the channel.
Right,
Comedy
Lady Gaga
act.
will perform, so
Yes.
we should
Gaga
all
will
watch
perform,
her,
absolutely.
right? If she
Yeah,
performs
she's
best
great.
song.
I haven't seen that movie, but it looks great. Yeah, I think we'd love to see that. Well, again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you for
We
having
Yeah,
us.
thank you for
appreciate
having
that.
us.
Watch the Oscars on February 24th, and thank you for watching Voices of Women.